got the story here. No. Maybe somewhere else. Here. No. No, not right. Maybe if I face this way, this'll do. You see, it's like the room where the story begins. The other rooms come later. The story is one of the utmost villainy and the soppiest sweetness. I'll begin. Wicked Uncle Jasper was a villain by profession. He had 7 sons, all boys, and all named after great villains of history. Caligula, Nero, Genghis, Tarquin, Belshazzar, Adolf, and Little Jack. Naturally, their father wanted them to follow in his wicked footsteps and sent them to a very select school for villains. Were they doing well, you ask? Oh no, they weren't. What's this? Cried Uncle Jasper in horror as he read their school reports. Caligula is at the bottom of the class in despicable treason, and Nero has totally failed in utter selfishness. Genghis, your marks in persecution are a disgrace. And Tarquin, what can I say to a boy who has done so poorly in cheating and embezzlement? Belshazzar seems to be a dead loss at robbery with violence, and Adolf would be better at embroidery and stamp collecting. And as for Little Jack, words fail me. You are bringing me grey hairs in sorrow to the grave. But this was just a poetic way of speaking, as Jasper had no grey hairs that you notice, because he touched them up with a good brand of hair dye. We do our best, Dad, said Caligula, but it's all so boring. Not good enough, Jasper cried. You tell me that villainy is boring. Great grommeting wangles. He was given to terrible swearing and cursing. Suppose Ivan the Terrible or Richard III had said it was boring and just given up. There was a guilty silence among the boys. They didn't want to disappoint their father, but there was no way out of it. They were all bored with villainy. Genghis, who loved learning and scholarship, said, Actually, Father, there seems to be a lot of doubt about whether Richard III was such a villain after all. You see, the history books of the time were written by his enemies, so naturally, don't try to confuse me with your academic quibbles, howled Jasper. I've made up my mind. You shall go to a special class on magic that's being run by the Witches' Action Group every Saturday morning. That might help to ginger you up, and it's bound to come in useful sometime. The boys groaned and moaned, but actually, when they came to do their lessons, they quite enjoyed them and did a family project. They made a doll out of wax and enchanted it so that it seemed to be alive. Even Jasper was intrigued. You've done well, boys, he said grudgingly. I suppose it's a beginning. Why did you have to make it so pretty, though? It looks all sort of worthy and virtuous. When we were making it, Genghis put a lot of the wrong stuff in, Caligula explained. We were supposed to put in a teaspoonful of naughtiness, and he put in a tablespoon of nobleness. It's made a lot of difference. Well, I don't want it around here, declared Jasper. It reminds me too much of my brother Julian. That doll is just the way he would like your cousin Prudence to be. Hey, Dad, said Nero eagerly, I've got a good idea. Let's send this doll to Cousin Prudence as a present. Being a present, they couldn't send it back, and it might stir up a lot of trouble one way or another. Oh, there you are, boys, cried Jasper, a sudden gleam of hope in his tired eyes. Nero has had a good idea. We'll buy some wrapping paper with roses on it and 20 meters of pink ribbon. Yeah, roses. Yeah, pink ribbon, cried the boys, who had been specially taught to detest roses and pink ribbon. Jasper's twin brother, the virtuous Julian, lived with his only daughter Prudence on the other side of the city. They didn't have much to do with the villainous side of the family, whereas Jasper's wife, who had always planned to redeem him from his wicked ways through the love of a good woman, had gone off to join the army soon after little Jack was born, and risen rapidly to the rank of Sergeant Major. Julian's wife had, sadly, died. Being the parent of an only daughter was a grave responsibility for Julian. Different people told him different things. When Prudence grew up, berry brown, beanpole thin and needle sharp, and often forgot to brush her tangled mouse brown hair, he was sure he'd gone wrong somewhere. It was an anxious father who looked at Prudence's school report and worried about her future. Look at this report, Prudence. Goodness gracious. Nearly bottom of the class in lofty sentiments and completely bottom in self-denial and bitter remorse. I'm not too impressed with that, Prudence. Why not? Asked Prudence rather indignantly. I've mended the television set twice this week, and it would have cost us a whole lot of money if we'd had to have an engineer to fix it. She wished her father wouldn't worry so much about her character. At that moment, there came a knock on the door. It was the delivery of a very large parcel wrapped in paper printed with roses and tied up with loops of pink string. Look at this, cried Julian. It's a present from wicked Uncle Jasper and the bad cousins. For me? I'll bet it explodes, Prudence said rather sourly. But she couldn't help being curious, and pulled off the string, folded the paper back, and opened the box inside. It was full of tissue paper with a card tucked in on top. Dear Prudence, said the card, we hope you have hours of fun with this walkie-talkie doll. For heaven's sake, exclaimed Prudence, a walkie-talkie doll? At the very least they could have called it a robot. But her cries of outrage were cut short. The tissue paper stirred, and out of its snowy foam rose a tall figure, almost as tall as Prudence, but much more delicate, with feathery golden curls, big blue eyes and long eyelashes. Then it spoke in a voice that sounded as if it had been eating golden syrup. Hello, Uncle Julian. Hello, dear Prudence. My name is Lily Rose Blossom, and I've come to play and to stay, with best wishes from Caligula, Nero, Tarquin, Genghis, Belshazzar, Adolf, and little Jack. It is a robot, and it means trouble, thought Prudence. That set of sharks wouldn't do a dog a good turn. But it was plain that Julian was very impressed with Lily Rose Blossom, who looked like his idea of an old-fashioned heroine. Sure enough, later he was heard to say, Prudence, Lily Rose Blossom has washed the dishes, dried the dishes, and put the dishes away. All you've done is to sit there reading a book about computers. It's not good enough. Prudence carried her electronics box and her notebooks out into the garage, where she straight away began inventing. Watch out, villains, she muttered. Two can play at that game. One bad robot deserves another. Jasper and his boys were puzzled when the big parcel covered in roses was delivered back to them the following day. They were astonished when out of the crumpled tissue paper there arose a figure of tin, wire, bent nails and bottle tops. It was topped by a round frying pan on which was a face with a rusty hole for a mouth. Out of the rusty hole came a voice. I am the Nadja. I am a gift from Cousin Prudence. Get lost, the lot of you. Grumbling malediction, exclaimed Jasper, delighted by the creature's insolence and repulsive appearance. Now that's something like it. Shall we kick it to pieces? Asked Jack, for the bright little fellow was anxious to win his father's approval. Just try it, creaked the Nadja, and I'll fill it you. Jasper was enchanted all over again. When they were all seated around the table, the Nadja didn't hesitate to push Belshazzar off his chair and sit down in his place. The meal was homemade hooligan pie with barbarity sauce and plentiful helpings of peccadillos and shenanigans, followed by delinquency pudding smothered with honeyed lies and sprinkled with fraud. The Nadja was wiping the last crumbs of fraud from around his rusty mouth with one hand, when with a simple sweep of the other, he sent his dish spinning across the room to shatter against the wall. Great spangling godwinkles, swore Jasper. He's got style, that Nadja. I like to see it. And he gave a great roar of laughter. However, a moment later, his good humour left him. Adolf, Genghis, where are you skulking off to? Well, Dad, we've run out of dishes, Genghis stammered. I thought I'd just rinse a few. Jasper seized Genghis and banged him against the wall a few times. Do the dishes indeed. Why, I bet that Nadja knows what to do about dirty dishes better. The Nadja took this as an invitation and set off eagerly into the kitchen with a rattling, ominous stride. A moment later, loud smashings and crashings were heard as he threw the dishes to the floor one at a time. Even Jasper's fine snarl wavered uncertainly as the smashing went on. And on, and on, and on. Eventually, the Nadja stalked out of the kitchen and went to the dining room door. Where do you think you're going? Jasper cried. Steal more dishes, the Nadja replied, swivelling its horrid holy frying pan head in Jasper's direction. Burgle a china shop. Jasper was delighted. Stab my vitals, he exclaimed. The Nadja's got what it takes. It sounds as if he's going to take what other people have got, said Nero disapprovingly. Jasper twirled his moustache. Maledictions, he swore. Now listen, the lot of you. I'm going out to raise general mayhem and, his voice took on a note of icy menace, by the time I return, I want you to have perpetrated some act of villainy so monstrous that even the police, hardened to all manner of horrors, will talk of yours in hushed voices. You're all old enough to be getting into the big time. And he slammed out of the house, following the Nadja. The boys looked at one another in silence. Well, frankly, that does it as far as I'm concerned, said Caligula. I vote we run away, go tonight, straight away, promptly, presto and apace. They'd actually often talked about running away. The appearance of the Nadja and Jasper's particularly insulting behaviour had merely hastened things for them a little bit. And meanwhile, on the other side of the city, another robot was persuading someone else to leave home. I'll tell you more tomorrow. Bye-bye. Caligula, Nero, Genghis, Tarquin, Belshazzar, Adolf and little Jack, all trained by their father in villainy, have left home because of a frightful robot called the Nadja. The Nadja had been sent to the boys and their father Jasper by Prudence, daughter of the virtuous Julian, who was Jasper's twin brother. She had sent her cousins and uncle, the nasty Nadja, because they sent her a sickly, sweet, goody-goody heroine sort of doll called Lily Rose Blossom, whose angelic behaviour was making life hell for the inventive Prudence. The boys left home without encumbering themselves with so much as a change of clothes. Through the midnight streets they trudged, their faces now greenish under the ghastly gleam of each street lamp, now shadowed as they passed beyond its circle of power. There were many hoodlums and larrikins abroad in the night, but the sight of 7 boys with basic training in all branches of villainy made them shrink into the doorways or fade into shadows. The boys stopped in their tracks, for down the long dim street a light was coming steadily towards them. "It's someone on a bicycle," Belshazzar said. The bicycle came purposefully onward, obviously pedalled by very competent feet. Then the rider suddenly saw them clustered in the gloom, and the cycle came to a rattling, unexpected stop. Good heavens! It's Caligula and Nero and all the wicked cousins, the bicycle rider said. It's Prudence, exclaimed Caligula. It's goody, goody Prudence. He immediately started to accuse, as villains are trained to do. I suppose you realise this is all your fault. That Nadja you sent us has driven us out of the home of our childhood. It wasn't the home of your childhood, said Prudence scornfully. Do you think I don't know that you've lived in about 50 homes and that you always leave without paying the rent? And anyway, what about that Lily Rose Blossom you sent me? She's absolutely unbearable, simpering all over the place, tidying up my electronics magazines. I've just had to run away, that's all. Funny, exclaimed Nero. Isn't that funny, Caligula? And all 7 brothers exclaimed in one chorus, We've run away too. Prudence was silent for a moment. In the greenish glow of the street light, they could see her smile, an unwilling smile. Shall we have a midnight party and talk this over? She suggested. I biked a long way and feel like refreshments. Good idea, Caligula said. Though there are no shops open at this hour of the night. We'll have to steal something. No need, Prudence replied. I've got lots of sandwiches. They were close to a scrap metal yard, which looked like the end of the world, as such businesses often do, filled with pieces of tin, rusting bicycles, oil drums, old car bodies and bits of roofing iron. Amongst them was an ancient bus, and into this the cousins climbed for their midnight feast. From her backpack, Prudence took huge packets of sandwiches. All good, straightforward food, she declared. Cold roast beef and horseradish sauce in here, she said. Lettuce and tomato in this one, and hard-boiled egg and mayonnaise and chives in here, and plain ham in this bundle. I don't mind if we eat it all either. Something else will turn up. There was silence while the cousins stuffed themselves with the delicious sandwiches. What are you running away to? Asked Prudence at last. You haven't brought much with you. Oh, we'll steal what we need as we go, Belshazzar explained. What about you? Oh, I've got an honest trade, Prudence said, rather snootily. I'm not going to go running round hiding from shadows and policemen. I'm going to repair television sets and stereos. I can, you know. Who is going to trust a girl of your age with their expensive television set? Asked Adolf sarcastically. One look at you and they'll shut their doors and yell, come back when you're 15 years old and have turned into a man. I may have a bit of a problem there, Prudence said gloomily. But I'll just have to try. I don't want to be a heroine, particularly the old-fashioned sort like my father wants me to be. It's not a very good line of business. But you've been trained to be an old-fashioned heroine, Caligula said, watching her keenly. Why not be one? I just don't want to be one, replied Prudence. That's very interesting, said Caligula slowly, because I just don't want to be a villain in spite of my training. Oh, nor me, said Nero. Our hearts aren't in it, added Tarquin, and there were murmurs of agreement from the 4 other boys. Everyone looked at everyone else as if they'd just been introduced. I want to be an actor, said Caligula. Acting was the one thing I did well at villainy school. I got top marks. Do you all want to be actors? Asked Prudence. No, I want to be a chef, said Nero. I thought I did, and since eating those roast beef and horseradish sauce sandwiches, I know I want to work with food for the rest of my life. It was as if a piece of jigsaw puzzle fitted into place. And you know, with all the beating up and chopping up and slicing and mashing there is in cooking, some of my villainy training will come in useful. Well, I suppose everyone will laugh at the idea, said Genghis, but I want to be a librarian. I was a librarian at school and it was the only thing that kept me going. I want to be one of those scholarly librarians working with old newspapers, diaries and so on, tracing obscure facts and running mysterious dates to a standstill before they vanish forever. Talking of family trees, Belshazzar remarked rather shyly, I want to be a gardener. When I thought I was going to have to be a villain, I wasn't too worried. I thought, well, I'm so bad at it, I'm bound to get caught, and then I'll try to get a job in the prison garden. I want to mow lawns and put the chippings on a really well-made compost heap, and I want to be a bus driver, said Adolf. who was sitting in the driver's seat of the dilapidated bus. I've only just thought of it, but now that seems a thing I've always wanted to be. What about you, Tarquin? I want to be a fortune teller, Tarquin said. I loved working with the cards at our classes in magic on Saturday morning, and I was never once wrong with the fortunes I foretold. What a funny mixture of things you want to do, said Prudence. I wonder if we'll ever be able to do them. Well, I don't see why not, said little Jack. I don't see why we shouldn't do all these things together at the one time. Caligula can look quite grown up. Why doesn't he act the part of a businessman and rent a television shop for Prudence with a house for us all at the back? Nero can cook our dinners and Belshazzar make a garden for us. Caligula can go out and look at television sets and stereos dressed as a television and stereo repairman. He can make himself look old and responsible and carry a big toolkit with Prudence hidden in it. As soon as he's alone with a television set, he opens his toolkit and out comes Prudence, fixes the television and then gets back into the bag to be carried home again. And while Caligula and Prudence are out doing that, Tarquin can be at home telling fortunes and Genghis can do our research for us, checking our recipes, new sorts of gardening ideas or even old ones that are nearly forgotten, or television things, whatever we need to know. His brothers and Prudence stared at him. What will you do while all this is going on? Caligula asked. Well, I'll do the publicity and promotion, little Jack cried. I'll draw posters saying television repairs and fortune-telling service, and Adolf can whiz around town on Prudence's bike, pasting them upon walls and telegraph poles. Then, when we can afford a bus, it'll be television repair, fortune-telling and suburban transport service with Adolf driving the bus. What about a restaurant? Cried Nero. You're forgetting a restaurant. I mean, suppose Belshazzar grows more than we can eat. We'd have to start a restaurant to use up the extra food and for me to develop my skill as a cook. Make it television repair, fortune-telling and suburban transport service with associated gourmet restaurant. Make it television repair, fortune-telling and suburban transport service with associated gourmet restaurant, market garden and reference library, Genghis hastily amended. That gives it an intellectual touch. And I have some ideas for updating the library by using trained parrots. Oh, it's going to be a lot to put on one poster, grumbled little Jack. Oh, but why not? Put it all on. We better get on with it, said Prudence. What a piece of luck that we met. Shall we just ride around until we find a suitable place, or what? Can't, said Genghis, unless you let us steal a car. Though, mind you, we all got very poor marks at car conversion at school. Our hearts weren't in it. Once Tarquin actually left a letter of apology with his name and address on it. Could we get this bus working? Adolf asked. No one seems to need it. Prudence actually investigated the possibility, for she was an expert with cars, but alas, it proved to have no motor and, as she told them, you can't repair what isn't there. However, there were fortunately many old bikes in various stages of disintegration, and it was but the work of a moment, well, several moments in fact, for Prudence to use her skill and the available bits of bike to put together a great long cycle with 8 pairs of handlebars and 9 wheels. Finally, the nonocycle was ready, cleverly hinged in the middle for taking sharp corners. We'll just trundle around inconspicuously on our nonocycle, keeping our eyes open for likely establishments, Prudence said. You know, I think things are looking up. Climbing on the nonocycle, they set off through the streets full of hope and sandwiches, looking for a suitable establishment, while in the sky above, the rosy fingers of dawn seemed to be drawing the curtain on a new scene, a new day. If ever we do get a restaurant, little Jack said, let's paint it all pink like the sunrise to recall this glorious morning. And everyone on the nonocycle agreed. Well, the runaways all seem to be okay, but what about their respective fathers and the revolting robots, the Nadja and Lily Rose Blossom? I'll tell you tomorrow. Ta. Because of an awful goody-goody, ucky-yucky robot called Lily Rose Blossom being sent to Prudence by her cousins, Prudence had to leave home. And because of a terrible, foul-mouthed, destructive robot called the Nadja being sent to the cousins by Prudence, the cousins had to leave home. The cousins, in case you've just joined the story, are brothers called Caligula, Nero, Genghis, Tarquin, Belshazzar, Adolf, and Little Jack. Well, there was the most extraordinary coincidence. The runaway cousins all met up and got on rather well. They got on so well that they were going to open up a television repair, fortune-telling and suburban transport service with associated gourmet restaurant, market garden and reference library. Such an establishment would successfully combine all their talents. But what about the parents who were left behind? The father who wanted his sons to be as wicked as he was, and the father who wanted his daughter to be an angelic, golden-haired heroine type of child. It wasn't until late the next morning that Jasper realised that his 7 sons had run away. "I do believe they're trying to break my poor heart," he said. "I love 'em for trying." Jasper was quite philosophical about losing his 7 boys. His brother Julian, on the other hand, was distraught to find Prudence had run away. He sent for the police, and within an hour, the house was filled with detectives looking at things through magnifying glasses. "Do you think you'll find her, my little girl?" he asked in a pathetic voice that made Prudence sound a lot smaller than she really was. "Oh, depends where she's gone," replied a cheerful policeman. "We'll certainly have a good look round, and you have got a spare one, so you're not so badly off." He looked over to where Lily Rose Blossom sat, smiling. "Lily Rose Blossom is a great comfort to me," said Julian. But later in the evening, when the policemen and the detective had gone, Lily Rose Blossom proved not to be a comfort at all. She came and stood by Julian's chair, holding a book, saying, "Look at this volume of improving stories I found in the spare room, Uncle Julian." It was called 1,000 Improving Little Tales for Progressive Little Minds by Nanny Gringe. Julian looked at the book, saying with a sad smile, "I don't think you need to be improved, Lily Rose Blossom. I think you're practically perfect." "Yes," said Lily Rose Blossom, "I am practically perfect, but you could do with a lot of improvement, dear uncle." Then she read him 17 improving stories, each one more boring than the one before. If he began to go to sleep, she had a way of clearing her throat that was very soft but also very threatening, and he was forced to wake up and listen. Hop! The improving stories went on and on. Julian found he desperately missed his daughter Prudence, in spite of her poor record at the school for heroines. On the other side of the town, Jasper was taking things easy. Indeed, for the first few days of being without the boys, he took things very easy indeed. He slept until nearly 2 o'clock every afternoon, and then just slouched in bed, reading racy stories, eating peppermint creams and slices of white bread and jam, and drinking fizzy wine. The Nadja, on the other hand, was on the move the whole time, and when, after a week in bed, Uncle Jasper, having caught up with his reading and having finished the jam and peppermint creams, staggered into his living room, he was astounded at the change. For a moment, he thought he'd somehow wandered into a supermarket. There was not only a complete dinner service in red china, but there were 76 tins of cat food, 14 tins of mahogany timber stain, innumerable ballpoint pens, 7 dozen eggs, 2 floppy floor mops, a box of tin fruit salad, 15 TV dinners, mostly fish, which Jasper did not like, as well as numerous other objects that it was difficult for Jasper to think of immediate use for, including an enormous picture in a golden frame of a naked lady playing golf. Being a villain, he liked pictures of naked ladies, but on the other hand, he hated golf and all other wholesome sports. So even the picture was spoiled for him. In fact, His first words were of complaint directed at the Nadja, who stood among all his loot. Why steal this particular stuff? Why 7 dozen eggs? Why all this timber stain and why all this pet food? I'll tell you what, you can eat pet food from now on until it's all used up. The Nadja gave a truly alarming growl and picked up a cleaver that Jasper had not noticed until that moment. Jasper hastily grabbed the TV dinners and some shoe polish when there came a loud knock at the door. The Nadja immediately dropped the cleaver and stiffened so that he looked like some kind of battered slot machine. Jasper was a little confused, his brain softened by peppermint creams and fizzy wine. He answered the door. A sad mistake, as there was a policeman on the other side of it, as well as a group of angry people. "I wish to make certain enquiries," said the policeman, looking with astonishment at Jasper. It had to be admitted that a week of peppermint creams, bread and jam and fizzy wine had not improved him. And the fact that he was wearing pyjamas with 2 buttons missing and clasping an armful of boot polish and TV dinners did not make a very good impression on the policeman or the angry crowd. "Are you the owner of a sort of tin man?" the policeman asked, taking out his notebook. "Suppose I am. What about it?" asked Jasper crossly. "I'll tell you what about it," exclaimed a powerfully built woman wearing a supermarket overall. "That wind-up frankincense has visited my part of the supermarket and has stolen 106 pairs of stockings plus some frilly unmentionables." "Well, I'm sure he's the one who nicked my cleaver," cried an irate butcher. "He's cleared the supermarket out of cat food," said a girl in a blue smock, "not to mention ballpoint pens." "Excuse me," said the policeman in a stern voice, silencing his supporters with severe frowns. Then, turning to Jasper, he said, "If you was the owner of the said wind-up tin man, I admit nothing," Jasper said haughtily. "Then I would like to come in and make an observation of your premises." "Do you have a warrant to search my house?" asked Jasper. The policeman laughed cheerily. "Oh, no need for that, sir. I assure you that I am your genuine legal article. Come on, sir, let me in." "No!" cried Jasper, and slammed and bolted the door. "Thank you," he added through the keyhole. He heard a clatter of feet as the policeman, supported by angry shopkeepers, ran down the steps and out of the gate, no doubt to get a warrant to search the house. "Now look what you've done," Uncle Jasper cried, shaking a fish dinner at Nadja. "Landed us right in it, haven't you? The idea was not to get caught, you know." Jasper had planned to leave without paying the rent, but not until he owed an extra month. Now he was forced to move away very quickly, with no transport organised, no disguises, and only a few minutes to arrange things. But he wasn't a villain for nothing. Quick as a wink, he had made wigs out of the floppy red mops, taken off his red pyjamas, and put on blue jeans and a yellow t-shirt. For a moment, he seriously thought of staining himself with the timber stain, but remembered the shoe polish in time. He emptied his life savings into a bag made from his bed quilt and put it into the wheelbarrow. A few minutes later, 2 strange figures left the house. They passed the policeman on the road, warrant in hand, but he and his followers were so anxious to get into the house that they scarcely noticed the 2 red-headed, well-tanned strangers hurrying in the opposite direction. Jasper suddenly realised that when his sons came back, they wouldn't know where to find him. Well, he had no address that he could leave. He didn't know where he was going. Some months later, a dishevelled, haggard figure burst from a wild, stormy night into the cosy atmosphere of the Tumble Inn, a neighbourhood tavern in a cultured part of town. "A glass of fizzy lemonade, please," he gasped desperately. The barman, who had been mixing a particularly lurid drink and glancing morosely at a blank television screen, showed none of the good cheer that barmen are supposed to show. "Make your mind up," he snarled. "Not 2 minutes ago you said you wanted a flaming arrow, a very simple sort of drink. I'm just mixing it, and I was going to bring it over to your table and set it alight." He looked up. Oh, I'm sorry, sir." For sitting at the table he was pointing to was another man, collapsed in a listless fashion, who was rather more furtive and possibly more terrified than the first man. "Hello, Julian," said the second man in a weary voice. "Have you come to save me from myself?" "Hello, Jasper," said Julian. "Actually, I'm the one who needs saving. I'm being pursued by a fiend incarnate." "Julian!" cried Jasper. "So am I." They stared at each other wildly. "You don't suppose it could be the same one, do you?" Julian breathed. "You wouldn't think there could be two fiends incarnate in the same city at the same time? Has yours got golden hair, blue eyes, and a clean apron?" "Great suffering Tom Woggles, no!" Jasper laughed bitterly. "Is yours made from tin and wire with a frying pan for a face?" "Dear me, no, not in the slightest." Julian looked perplexed. The barman now came forward with 2 drinks. "Oh, I'm sorry if I was a bit terse with you gents a moment back," he said in a very oily voice. "I thought you was having me on. Likewise, I'm a bit of a prey to melancholy at present because the TV's broken and I'm missing me programmes." "Indeed," said Jasper with withering sarcasm. But the barman wanted to talk about his broken television set and wouldn't be put off. "I've sent for the experts," he went on, "and they promised to send none other than Mr. Laculagi." exclaimed the impatient Jasper, making a sort of wet, clicking sound used by villains from time to time. Julian gave him a reproving look and said to the man in kind tones, "Who are these experts you have summoned, may I ask?" "Them," said the barman, and pointed to a poster on the wall. "Oh, it's very bright," said Julian rather critically. "Ah, yes. Television repairs, fortune-telling and suburban transport service with associated gourmet parrot restaurant, market garden and parrot reference library. I've seen these posters everywhere lately." Such services must mean a lot of experts. You and I know who these experts are, but Jasper and Julian don't. So think of their amazement when they discover where their missing niece and sons, in one case, and missing nephews and daughter, in another case, are, and what they're all doing. That's tomorrow. Cheerio! Uncles fleeing from frightful fiends. Jasper was being chased by the dreadful Nadja, and Julian by the sickly sweet Lily Rose Blossom. The Nadja and Lily Rose Blossom were robots invented by their missing children. Jasper's 7 sons had grown bored with their father's villainous ways and had left home, and Julian's daughter, Prudence, was unable to be the heroine her father wanted her to be. So she packed her bags as well. The fathers were left with the frightful robots, so they were forced to flee from their respective homes. By coincidence, they met in a bar, and there they noticed an advertisement for the Parrot Restaurant, an establishment run by a group of enterprising young people. "Their bus goes by here every night now," said the barman, "taking orders of ravenous diners to the restaurant. The vegetables are fresher than fresh. Of course, the meals are fabulously expensive, but people are saving up and getting there somehow." "Very gratifying for the proprietors," said Julian wistfully. "They must be making a packet," said Jasper sourly. "You know, Julian, the last few weeks have made me lose faith in my chosen profession. I don't mind telling you. All my life savings gone, and my 7 boys vanished." "Your sons? Gone?" cried Julian. "But my little Prudence has vanished too. The police have utterly failed to locate her." "Hardly surprising. They've spent all their time chasing me," said Jasper gloomily. "It was that doll you and your family sent her. That Lily Rose Blossom, that fiend incarnate." "Hang on a moment." Jasper sat up. "Lily Rose Blossom wasn't a fiend incarnate. She was only a sickly, simpering, walkie-talkie doll. If you want to talk about fiends incarnate, what about the Nadja, eh? If you knew the time I've had. He's fascinated by supermarkets, and his idea is to bring everything he steals to me. Imagine waking up in the morning surrounded by packets of frozen pastry, paper towels, icing sugar, ginger nuts, lavatory paper and nutmeg graters. Oh, but you don't know what it is to suffer. Oh, don't I? Cried Julian, aroused to an un-Julian-like fury at last. Well, you don't know what it's like to have a golden-haired doll following you wherever you go, urging you to improve your life, crying over you in public places like the bus and the bank and the post office. So when Lily Roseblossom reads me improving tales until 4 o'clock in the morning, well, what I say is, that isn't Lily Roseblossom. That's a fiend incarnate. Rightly said, brother, exclaimed Jasper, and the twins clasped hands in true brotherhood for the first time in many, many years. As this moving scene took place, a tall figure entered the Tumble Inn, bringing with him a large canvas toolkit with roller skates riveted to the bottom of it so that it could be wheeled along beside its owner. What could be seen of the man looked young, but much of his face was hidden by a large chestnut-coloured moustache. The barman hurried forward in an obsequious fashion. "Mr. Laculagi," he cried. "Oh, I'm glad to see you, Mr. Laculagi. My TV has been on the blink for nearly 2 hours, and they've been 2 hours of horror and desolation for me." At this moment, Mr. Laculagi's eyes fell on Jasper and Julian, and he stood like one who had suddenly recognised a long-lost relative. "Oh, they're just customers, nobodies, don't worry about them," said the barman, fawning. "Take no notice of them, Mr. Laculagi. Look, my TV's over here." And he and Mr. Laculagi tenderly guided the television set into the next room, while Jasper and Julian watched curiously. "I thought that the tool bag seemed to wriggle a bit," said Julian doubtfully. "It looked as if it had something alive in it." "Oh, never mind the tool bag," Jasper exclaimed. "Rumbling grudge-nappets, why did he look at us like that? And he reminds me of someone, you know. I swear I've seen him somewhere before." The barman reappeared from the other room. "What a lovely fellow," he declared, beaming. "He's promised me he'll have the television fixed in a few minutes by a special process that never works when anyone else is in the room." "My Prudence was a whiz with television sets," Julian recalled. "But Lily Roseblossom won't even let me turn our set on now. I often dream of hearing my little Prudence's voice." "You do miss the boys, I suppose, now they've gone?" "Miss them!" cried Jasper. "I miss them terribly. Their very names ring in my memories like golden bells." At this moment, faintly, but none the less clearly, there came the sound of breaking glass and screaming. The brothers stiffened with apprehension. The barman ran to the tavern door. "What's going on?" he cried. "Oh, what a scene! Some nuts trying to make off with an armful of soap powder from the supermarket. Look, there are police all over him. He's thrown him off as if they were thistledown. He's really weird looking. You won't believe this, but he looks as if he's got a frying pan for a head." "There's a little girl there, and she looks very upset. A dear little girl with lovely golden curls in a blue dress." Julian and Jasper half rose from their seats. With a bound, Jasper was across the room, shaking the barman's arm urgently. "Listen," he hissed, "we've got to leave. We must go now. We've got to get out straight away." "So," the barman said blankly, "feel free to walk out any time you like." "Oh, we need disguises. We're being followed by enemies," Jasper explained. "What can you give us to help us disguise ourselves?" The barman looked at them. "Towels," he said at last. "Towels. But it'll cost you." "We'll take them," Jasper cried. The brothers vanished into the men's washroom with an armful of towels. Mr. Laculagi clutching his tool bag, suddenly emerged from the room next door, pushing the television set in front of him. It was working again, showing a picture of crystal clarity and wonderfully rich colour. The barman paid Mr. Laculagi with folding money and many flowery compliments, showed him to a door into a side street, and then went back to the front door to see what was happening with the policeman and the supermarket thief. The door of the men's washroom opened, and Jasper and Julian appeared, transformed by boot polish and towels into Eastern gentlemen, their brown faces wearing inscrutable expressions of oriental calm. But the barman was too interested in what was going on down the street to notice them. "Someone's coming!" he shouted. "Oh, dearie me, it's that supermarket pilferer with the head like a frying pan. The little girl in blue's close behind him. Oh, they're coming this way. Wouldn't be surprised if they were planning to come in here." Jasper and Julian scrambled out of the side door just as a bright blue bus, painted with yellow suns, orange stars and pink parrots, pulled up at the bus stop. Mr. Laculagi climbed on first, with Jasper and Julian fretting at his heels. The bus driver looked at them in astonishment. He seemed very young for a bus driver, but he must have been of a reasonable age, for he had a large golden moustache, about the same size as Mr. Laculagi's. As Jasper and Julian collapsed onto the front seat, the bus drew away down the road. Glancing back, Julian saw through the windows of the Tumble Inn the Nadja bowl the barman over and stand on him, while Lily Roseblossom smiled her candy-floss smile, a smile that now seemed terrible to him. The back of the driver's neck seemed very familiar to Jasper. He slumped in his seat, frowning to himself. Then he sat up again. "By the way," he asked, "where are we going? What bus is this and where is it off to?" "We're on our way to the much-praised Parrot restaurant," Mr. Laculagi told him. "You'll love it when you get there." When they dared to look around at last, Julian and Jasper were surprised and even alarmed. The bus was beautiful pink inside, with purple parrots painted all over the ceiling. The seats were full of passengers carrying pink balloons with purple parrots printed on them. There was a scent of flowers and music filled the air. Neither Jasper nor Julian could remember this sort of thing on any bus they had travelled on before. "Excuse me," said Mr. Laculagi, "you seemed a little agitated back there, as if you were fleeing from some danger." "Well, we're both being pursued by fiends incarnate," said Jasper. "Both of us by a different one." "Oh, that explains it," said Mr. Laculagi. "Well, if I were you, I'd go all the way to the Parrot restaurant. I'm sure they wouldn't permit a fiend incarnate to cross their threshold." "I don't fancy Parrot," Jasper grumbled. "Oh, the parrots aren't there to be eaten," Mr. Laculagi reassured him. "I don't think they've ever served Parrot. No, the parrots are part of the reference library service. For instance, if you're interested in, say, Alice in Wonderland, or in stamp collecting, or in the history of Upper Mongolia, you simply ask for the appropriate parrot, mentioning the language you prefer, and the parrot will be brought to your table to entertain you with conversation about your hobby during your meal." "It sounds expensive," Jasper said. "Oh, do try it," advised Mr. Laculagi. "I think that in your case, well, in your two cases, that is, they will feed you entirely free of charge." "But why should they?" asked Julian. At that very moment, a short figure in a pink and purple uniform came down the aisle of the bus. A mere boy, one would have said, had it not been for his large red moustache. In fact, he looked very like the bus driver, if you chose to overlook the colour of their moustaches. "You gentlemen are to travel free," he said in a high-pitched voice. "This ride is on the house." "I thought it was on the bus," Jasper muttered. "2 balloons for you gentlemen, 1 each," the boy said, giving them each a pink balloon with a purple parrot on it. "The Parrot restaurant hopes you will accept these with our compliments." "Oh, very nice," exclaimed Julian with delight. "I say, the Parrot restaurant certainly knows how to make people feel wanted." But Jasper accepted his balloon with suspicion. His old villain's training made it hard for him to sit holding a balloon. He was also teased and tantalized by the resemblance that the bus driver and the conductor and Mr. Laculagi had to one another. Or was it their moustaches he remembered? Jasper wasn't sure. Tomorrow, Jasper will discover who these mustachioed people are. And Julian has a surprise too. Till then, goodbye. Escaping from the dreadful Nadja and the sickly sweet Lily Rose Blossom, Julian and Jasper found themselves on a colourful bus, bound for the Parrot restaurant. Jasper admitted he missed his 7 runaway sons, and Julian longed to see his daughter Prudence again. The bus stopped. Clutching balloons, Jasper and Julian scrambled out and into the foyer of the Parrot restaurant. Here, in the rose-pink glow, the crowd from the bus was met by a mysterious figure wearing a silver mask and holding a large glass bubble that shone with rainbow-coloured lights. "I am the fortune teller," said this apparition, "and I foretell that you will all have a magnificent dinner with entertainment of a totally unexpected kind." They were shown to the best table in the restaurant by a very smooth, though very short waiter with an enormous menu. "For you, gentlemen, the food is entirely free," said the waiter, his voice squeaky behind a large black moustache. "There's another one, looking like everyone else," said Jasper nervously. "Do you suppose they come in a set?" A second waiter, an even shorter one, with a ginger moustache and a ginger beard, held on by rubber bands around the ears, brought a wine list. Jasper stared at him sharply. Aren't you the bus conductor?" he asked. "I can be. I have been, I will be again," was the strange answer. "But my main work is gardening. Choose which wine you most fancy. It's all on the house, you know." And off he went. A moment later, a third waiter appeared, the smallest so far. He presented a third card, beautifully decorated with paintings of birds, butterflies and leaves, and headed Parrot List. "Parrot List?" Julian exclaimed, and turned to question the waiter still further, but he was already gliding away, and when they looked down, they saw that he had added to his height by wearing roller skates. "Well, I've dined in some funny places in my time," Jasper said, "but I've never seen anything to equal this." But Julian looked around like one enchanted. At the end of the big room, the chef could be seen working at a beautiful bench of pink marble. Fruit trees in tubs stood around the walls, and many garden boxes filled with wonderfully green vegetables, which were picked and cooked while you waited. A sudden shaft of golden light fell on the centre of the room, and into its bright circle stepped a dazzling figure in golden tights, wearing a golden mask with gold-rimmed spectacles put on over it. One of the waiters struck up a jolly tune on a mouth organ, and the golden librarian began his song. "When you sit down to dine while selecting the wine and deciding on cabbage or carrot, pray don't feel resigned to neglecting your mind. Choose a fluent and well-informed parrot." When it came to ordering dinner, Jasper had a delicious onion soup, followed by eels in green sauce, followed by loin fillets of pork with prunes and cream sauce. And Julian had watercress soup, an avocado pear with lemon juice, and a mixed vegetable dish, including grilled mushrooms, asparagus, and braised red cabbage in red wine and chestnuts. These exotic delicacies were washed down with pink champagne. A rare hyacinthine macaw was wheeled over to their table and recited the poems from Alice in Wonderland in several different languages. It was a most delightful and cultural occasion. Who would have thought it? Said Julian wonderingly. One moment fleeing from Lily Rose Blossom and the Nadja, the next dining in undreamed of luxury. As he spoke, the restaurant door burst open, and a rattling, clanking sound announced the entrance of the Nadja. He stood at the door of the Parrot restaurant and had never looked more threatening than he did in the ghostly pink light. Beside him, absolutely spotless, even at the end of a scrambling, searching day, was Lily Rose Blossom, all golden curls, fluttering eyelashes and candy floss smile. Julian and Jasper stared at the two creatures in horror. Across the polished floor, the Nadja and Lily Rose Blossom advanced upon the cowering brothers. But suddenly, the fortune teller moved and stood in front of them, defending Julian and Jasper from their unwelcome shadows. The small wine waiter with the ginger moustache and beard, the even smaller parrot waiter with the grey moustache, both joined the fortune teller, ranging themselves between Jasper and Julian and the Nadja and Lily Rose Blossom. The librarian, in his golden mask and tights, joined the waiters, the fortune teller and the chef. "You can't keep them from us," said Lily Rose Blossom. "We know our duty and we are tireless." The other customers in the restaurant were full of interest, thinking this was some kind of show put on for their benefit. "We have the right," the Nadja grated. "They gave us the right, they welcomed us. Jasper and I, we've shared shenanigans together." "I've supped dear Uncle Julian's paragon soup with him," simpered Lily Rose Blossom. "But so have we," said a new voice, a resonant voice, a voice of power. "Before you came on the scene, Jasper often served us hooligan pie, and we ate it together." It was none other than Mr. Laculagi skating his repair bag over the restaurant floor. Inside, something stirred and unfolded. Out of the bag rose a thin, brown, smiling girl with a smudge of oil on one cheek and a screwdriver in her hand. "And I've eaten many a paragon with Julian," she cried. "Lily Rose Blossom, you are just an invention of ours," said Mr. Laculagi. "A wicked whim, a caprice." He removed his chestnut moustache. "Caligula!" yelled Jasper, and then was silent, staring in amazement. The chef removed his moustache, the waiters removed theirs, the librarian and the fortune teller took off their masks, and there stood Nero, Belshazzar, Adolf, and little Jack. There stood Genghis, Tarquin, and Prudence, revealed to all. "Mr. Nadja, you are nothing but a pile of tins, wires, and bottle tops," she said. "I know all your secrets and circuits, for I put them together." "It's my Prudence," cried Julian. Then, for the second time that evening, the door of the Parrot restaurant burst open. In came 15 policemen, led by a detective inspector. The detective inspector's blue official gaze fell on Jasper. "Ah, sir," he said briskly, "is it you that superintends the activities of that well-known supermarket thief, the Nadja?" "I take no responsibility," said Jasper quickly. "Because, sir, I have a proposal that it would be to his advantage to listen to," said the detective inspector. "We have this police college, you see, and our young men are supposed to get practice dealing with various crimes. Well, we have a simulated supermarket there, done up just like a real one, with specials and soap powder and those little trolleys. The Nadja can come there and steal to his heart's content morning, noon and night, and our young hopefuls can get a bit of practice at dealing with the supermarket thief. I am authorised to offer him a nice room with a view and with dinner provided." The Nadja turned his astonished frying-pan face to look at Jasper. You go," said Jasper. "Don't mind me, old fellow. Don't let me stand in your way. This is a great chance for you." Said Lily Rose Blossom, looking sternly at the Nadja. I shall go with him, for I can see that improving him will be a real challenge. The Nadja must have been in a good mood, for he went fairly quietly, simply breaking a chair with a single blow as he left, and clanking a bit in his tinny, rattling way, followed by Lily Roseblossom and the 15 policemen. Jasper gave a huge sigh of relief and beamed all over his face. And though Julian was trying to look grave and regretful, he couldn't keep it up, and he sighed and beamed too. So Jasper was reunited with his 7 sons, and Julian with his single, tall, brown, tangled daughter, screwdriver and all. By 2 o'clock in the morning, all the patrons of the Parrot restaurant had gone home full of delicious food and richly entertained, vowing to start saving at once to come back again. The 2 happy families, Jasper and his 7 sons, Julian and his only daughter, were left alone together to count the enormous profits made from yet another successful evening. All around them, cockatoos and macaws watched with sympathetic interest. "You know," said Jasper, as Prudence counted the money, "I think I'll retire from villainy." "Oh, no, father," said Caligula, looking at him sternly. "You might be tempted out of retirement. No, you would be the ideal man to take over responsibility for our expanding parrot empire. You had a year or 2 of piracy in your youth. I feel that should give you a sympathetic parrot background." "Great Williping Grudge Nuzzlers," swore Jasper. "What a superb idea!" The parrots all cackled, and those with crests raised them approvingly. "Great Williping Grudge Nuzzlers," they repeated. "And I may have to be around to balance things out by studying exclamations of an emphatic but refined nature," said Julian quietly. Tarquin put his fortune-teller's globe on the floor in front of them, even though it was shooting out rainbow-coloured sparks. "I foretell a mixed biscuit future for all of us. Over the ocean of our intention sails the good ship Serendipity." "Marvellous, isn't it?" Jasper said sarcastically. "Give a boy a bit of independence and he goes around spouting words his poor old father would never dare to employ. Put it in English, will you? Great Williping Grudge Nuzzlers. Never a dull moment," foretold Tarquin. And neither there was. Goodbye.